There is no warning, no time to prepare. One moment everything is normal and the next the air is gone. Not fading, not thinning, but completely absent, as if the very concept of breathing has been erased in an instant. The human body is not designed for space, and the difference between survival and death is measured not in minutes, but in seconds. The first instinct is to inhale, but that is exactly what must not happen, because in a vacuum, holding breath is one of the fastest ways to cause irreversible damage. Air inside the lungs expands rapidly when external pressure disappears, and if it is not released immediately, it can rupture delicate tissue, causing severe injury within moments. The correct reaction would be to exhale instantly, but instinct does not always follow physics. Within the first few seconds, the absence of pressure begins to affect the entire body. The skin does not explode, contrary to popular myths, but it does begin to swell as gases within tissues expand. This process, known as ebullition, causes bodily fluids to start forming vapor bubbles, particularly in areas exposed to the vacuum. The sensation would be unlike anything experienced on Earth, as the body struggles to maintain stability in an environment it was never meant to encounter. At the same time, oxygen in the bloodstream begins to drop rapidly. The brain is extremely sensitive to oxygen deprivation, and within approximately 10 seconds, cognitive function starts to decline. Vision narrows, coordination fails, and awareness begins to fade, not as a sudden blackout, but as a gradual loss of clarity, like a signal slowly disappearing. Temperature, interestingly, is not the immediate threat. Space is often associated with extreme cold, but heat transfer in a vacuum works differently. The body does not instantly freeze because there is no medium for rapid heat loss through conduction or convection. Instead, the more immediate danger is the lack of oxygen and pressure, which disrupts the body's internal balance almost instantly. As the seconds pass, exposure to unfiltered solar radiation becomes another factor. Without the protection of Earth's atmosphere, the body is subjected to intense ultraviolet and other forms of radiation. However, this effect takes longer to become critical compared to the immediate physiological responses already occurring. By around 15 seconds, the loss of consciousness becomes likely. The brain, deprived of oxygen, cannot maintain awareness, and the body enters a state where voluntary control is lost. At this point, survival is still technically possible, but only if the individual is returned to a pressurized environment quickly. The heart continues to beat for a short time after consciousness is lost, circulating increasingly oxygen-poor blood. Cellular processes begin to fail, and the body moves closer to irreversible damage. The difference between recovery and permanent injury becomes a matter of timing, measured in seconds rather than minutes. Around 30 seconds into exposure, the situation becomes critical. While the body has not exploded or frozen, it is no longer functioning in a way that supports life for much longer. The lack of oxygen continues to damage vital organs, and the longer the exposure continues, the lower the chance of recovery becomes. Despite the extreme conditions, there is a narrow window in which rescue is possible. If repressurization occurs within roughly 90 seconds, survival may still be achievable, although not without potential long-term effects. Beyond that window, the damage becomes increasingly severe and eventually irreversible. But even within this short time frame, the experience represents one of the most extreme conditions a human body can endure, a direct confrontation with the physical limits of life outside Earth's protective environment. Beyond the initial seconds of exposure, the situation transitions from survivable to catastrophic as the absence of oxygen and pressure begins to cause widespread cellular damage. The brain, having already lost consciousness due to hypoxia, starts to experience conditions that can lead to permanent injury if oxygen is not restored quickly. Neurons, highly sensitive to oxygen deprivation, begin to fail, and the longer this state persists, the greater the likelihood of irreversible effects. At the same time, the cardiovascular system continues to operate briefly, but with diminishing effectiveness. Blood, no longer properly oxygenated, circulates through the body, providing less and less support to vital organs. The heart may continue beating for a short period, but without oxygen, its ability to sustain life rapidly declines. The expansion of gases within the body stabilizes after the initial exposure, but the damage caused during that phase remains significant. Tissues that have experienced swelling or stress may begin to deteriorate, and the body's inability to regulate internal conditions becomes increasingly apparent. If exposure continues beyond the critical window, the chances of recovery drop sharply. Even if repressurization were to occur, the accumulated damage to the brain and other organs could result in long-term or permanent impairment. The body systems are interconnected, and failure in one area quickly affects others, creating a cascade of effects that are difficult to reverse. Meanwhile, the external environment remains unchanged. Space does not react, does not intervene, and does not provide any mechanism for survival. It is not actively hostile, but it is completely indifferent, governed by physical laws that operate without consideration for biological life. In controlled environments, such as spacecraft and space stations, extensive systems are designed to maintain pressure, provide oxygen, and regulate temperature precisely because even small deviations can have significant consequences. These systems represent the difference between life and death, highlighting how dependent human survival is on carefully maintained conditions. The absence of such systems exposes the fundamental vulnerability of the human body. Evolution has optimized it for a narrow range of conditions found on Earth, and outside that range, the margin for survival becomes extremely limited. Space represents one of the most extreme examples of this, where even a brief exposure can push the body beyond its limit. Despite this, there have been rare incidents in which individuals were exposed to near-vacuum conditions and survived, typically due to rapid intervention and immediate restoration of pressure. These cases demonstrate that survival is not entirely impossible, but they also emphasize how small the window of opportunity truly is. Ultimately, the scenario illustrates a broader principle. Human life depends on a delicate balance of environmental factors, including pressure, oxygen, and temperature, all of which are carefully regulated on Earth but absent in space. The removal of any one of these factors begins to destabilize that balance, and the removal of all of them at once creates conditions that are almost impossible to survive. From a distance, space appears calm and silent, a vast expanse that invites exploration and curiosity. But beneath that appearance lies an environment that offers no support for life, where survival depends entirely on technology and preparation. Without those protections, the human body is left exposed to conditions that operate on timescales far shorter than most people expect. And the most striking aspect of this scenario is not how violent or dramatic it appears, but how quickly it unfolds. There is no long struggle, no extended period of adaptation, only a brief and rapidly closing window in which survival is still possible. In the end, the difference between life and death in space is measured in seconds, and once that threshold is crossed, there is no gradual decline, only a point beyond which recovery is no longer possible, marking the boundary between survival and the limits of human biology.